Here we are then, guys, another review video. These things are getting quite common for me now. I think this is my third or fourth review video. As always though, I'm not looking to do some super in-depth dive. There's plenty of channels out there that you can get that from, and particularly with the CSL DD Wheelbase we're looking at today, that is all over YouTube. You've already seen it a million times and I'm asking you to watch mine, so I'm trying to give a slightly different perspective to all the videos that are out there at the moment, and that is really the sim racer's perspective. Let's have a quick look at some of the features. Let's talk about how we mount it. Let's talk about what's good, what's bad. Let's get it on the rig, have a little go with it, and go from there really. What I don't want to do is start ripping it apart. We all know the channel we can go to if we want to have a look at the internals and how they all work, which, whilst is fascinating, one, I'm not qualified to do, and two, you can watch a much better video elsewhere. So, without further ado, let's go. So, here we are then. First impression I got from this, and I should say I came from CSL Elite to the CSL DD, is how small it is. It is tiny, but it is hefty. It's got some serious weight to it. I don't know if it's lead lined or something crazy, but it is seriously heavy. But it is very small, which meant on my rig I could get my screens even closer, which is pretty cool and probably a bonus for a lot of people. But yeah, I was quite surprised by the weight to it, which is only a good thing. Weight for me usually signifies good build quality, so I was quite pleased that it was so big. As I said, I stepped up from CSL Elite to this. I'll get into that a little bit when we get a bit closer about how that's felt making that change. But this is probably enough time looking at me holding it. Let's get the camera in closer, let's have a look at some of the features, and then let's chuck it on the rig. Here it is then, CSL Elite in all its glory. I'm afraid I don't have a fancy turntable, you'll have to put up with me giving it a little rotate for you. But it is quite weird when I first look at it actually, just because it has got such that cubed shape to it. It was actually a little bit of an odd shape to look at when you're used to looking at rectangular or close to rectangular wheelbases anyway. But let's have a quick look at some of the features. So as you've probably seen already, aluminium centre, which is all the cooling fins, so it's got no fans in it, which makes it silent when you're using it, which is quite novel coming from the CSL Elite, but pretty cool. Plastic front and back, you can just about see the changes there. But it doesn't really, that plastic at either end doesn't make it feel any lower quality or anything like that. It all looks well built and like it should be there. Come around to the back, if you've ever owned a Fanatec device, it's fairly common. The only big change really from the CSL Elite for me was that the USB going into the PC now is a USB-C. This end, USB-A, still into the PC, but that was different. And the connection in there, you've probably seen this already, but it is positive, but it does move a little bit. Completely fine with it on my rig, because I'm fortunate enough to have aluminium extrusion rig, but if you were on one of the cheaper rigs, or a foldaway rig or something, the amount of movement you get, I would be a little nervous, but probably nothing to worry about in reality. Power supply into there, talk about that in a second. Data, I've no idea what that does, I've never seen anything plug into any of those. Then you've got your usual shifter 1, shifter 2, pedal and handbrake, so if you're using the Fanatec lineup you can go into those. So that's the ports. Swinging it round to the front, it's the same shaft as was on the CSL Elite. It's slightly different with this collar on here. I believe this is so you can change the shaft, because there is a new quick release system coming from Fanatec, and you'll be able to take this shaft out, put the new one on, which will mean the new quick release system will work. Unfortunately, I'm sure it will mean you'll also have to buy several new quick releases for however many wheels you have, but we shall see. So you might notice along the bottom here, I've got these 3 channels. These take T slot nuts. You've got the same channels on the side. It's quite hard to get the camera to pick them up, but you've got one in there, same on the other side, nothing along the top. But these take the T slot nuts that Fanatec kindly provide you with, and these allow the wheelbase to be mounted to wherever it is, and they move all the way along, which means it will be compatible with pretty much any wheel plate or connector that you've got for your rig at the moment. Chances are you can line these 3 up in some way. This means you can get exactly the same mounting as the CSL Elite as well, which is very handy for me. First criticism of the wheelbase here though, it's really good that Fanatec chuck in these T-nuts, but they don't supply you with any bolts. Now, not a huge issue, but for the sake of a few pence it would have cost them to chuck those in. If you've just decided that sim racing is your thing, and you've dropped several £100s on a brand new wheelbase, pedal set, rim, you've got a new rig, your T-nuts arrive, you've got no way of putting your brand new exciting wheelbase onto your rig. And I think that's a little bit poor. It's not the end of the world. It didn't bother for me because I was changing, so I had bolts left over from the CSL Elite, but I think they could have just chucked 3 bolts in for the small cost it would have been to them. Would have been quite a nice little extra. But it's only a very small thing. Just going around the front here, we've got a power button. Not dissimilar idea to the CSL Elite having the power. This lights up and you can press it once to go through various PC, Xbox and CSW modes. Press and hold it, turn it on and off. Very slight thing I would have changed. It would have been nice to have just a press button and a separate mode one, simply because when I'm in a hurry to turn it off, often I don't hold it down long enough and I end up changing modes, and it's a bit of a frustrating thing for me. It's not really the end of the world, but just something would have been quite nice. So that's everything really from our close-up of the CSL DD. I think the most important thing to do now is to mount it on the rig. I will put a camera in so you can see how I mount mine, so you see how those T-slots work. And then we'll just go for a little drive on a couple of sims and talk about how it feels. Here we are then, back in our familiar surroundings, but my wheelbase is in my hand. Got a little camera set up just here, and I'm just going to show you how easy it is to mount this on an existing rig anyway. So we'll cut to that now. So here we go, this is my SimLabs GT1 Evo. This is the same plate that I was previously using for my CSL Elite. Exactly the same mounting holes. What I've done is partially screwed in the T-nuts, as you can see there. I'm going to plug these in so you can see that, and then in theory I should just better slide it into place, tighten up the bolts. So let's see how we go. So first thing, I've sort of routed everything in. Ignore all the other wires, it's an absolute mess in here. But as I mentioned earlier, this is our USB-C, and then this is our power pack. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So I'm going to try and do this so you can sort of see, but it's fairly standard PC type connector. Power pack clicks into place, and then the USB-C in there. Then, in theory, I can line up these T-slot nuts, slide it back as far as it goes, and that is it, in position. All I've got to do now is just tighten these up underneath. So there we go. It's all nicely mounted and in place, and I can slide on my rim, and it is all ready to go. We'll turn it on, and there it is, just doing its calibration, and it won't take long at all, and that's it, ready to go. So this plate is what I use for my CSL DD. It does have a very small amount of flex in it, but we're talking really not a lot. Any flex that you see is coming from that point. If I go right on the end of the wheel, that sort of movement you're seeing there, which is only small, is from this plate as opposed to the shaft or the mounting. I'm very happy with how it is mounted. So it's in place. You can just about see the top of my wheel rim there. And I'm just going to really quickly talk about the power and the force feedback on this before we just jump into a couple of sims and have a bit of a go. So you get 2 options when you buy the CSL DD. You get the Boost Kit 180 or the standard power, which I think is 90 instead of 180. My understanding is that the 90 is basically included in the price, and the Boost Kit 180 is an additional on top. Now if you buy it as a bundle, Boost Kit 180 is slightly cheaper. If you buy the Boost Kit separately, it is quite pricey. I'm not going to go into huge details about prices, because they probably will change, and this video will be very dated if they do. But what I will say is, if you are stepping up from a very budget type wheelbase, you know, the early run thing, moving to a direct drive wheel is going to be a humongous step, regardless of what power you go for. If, like me, you've gone from the CSL Elite, which in itself is a big step from one of those cheaper wheelbases, you've gone from the CSL Elite to this, then I do think that extra Boost Kit power is going to make the difference between this being a step up to something smoother versus a step up to something smoother, quicker, and ultimately better. I don't think it's essential, but I do think you will notice a difference. There's been a lot of controversy about how expensive that Boost Kit 180 is. Ultimately, it's just a power pack. How are they able to charge what they're charging for it? And I think we're thinking about it the wrong way if we get down into that debate too much. For me, this wheelbase was always designed to be run with the 180 power pack. What they wanted to do was take over the market with a cheap DD, and they were able to do that with the 90 power pack. But what that's meant is I imagine their profit margins are very tight on these around that lower power pack. And so they're looking to recoup their money on the Boost Kit 180, and that's where they're going to be making profit. But let's not lose sight of the fact that even with that Boost Kit 180, this is a very cheap direct drive wheel that performs fantastically. So I think getting bogged down in it's a load of money for a power pack is the wrong way of looking at this. Consider it as a whole. You can have a very cheap direct drive wheel with the 90 power pack, or you can have a very cost-effective but equally very good performing direct drive wheel with the 180, and I think that's how is best to look at it. As always, like I say, just my opinions. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people that think I'm wrong, and that's fine. People are entitled to their opinion always, but that's kind of how I think is the best way of looking at these things. That is probably the most amount of talking I've ever done on a review video directly to camera, so let's jump in some sims. Right, here we go then. We've jumped in the Ferrari GT3 at Spa. I'm not going to do too much driving because any other videos you watch in the future I'll be using this wheelbase. But the first thing I noticed on iRacing is just the increase in feel you get, again, coming from the CSL Elite. And what I was finding with this wheelbase was I was feeling everything I was feeling in the CSL Elite. It was just a lot clearer to me. And because I think it felt clearer through the rim, it makes reacting a lot easier, and I'm finding now that I'm able to live life a little bit more dangerously on the throttle because I've got much more confidence that I'm going to feel the car start to rotate a lot sooner than I was before, and because of that I can make the steering inputs it needs to keep me going. So the question that a lot of people might have in their minds is, will the CSL DD make me faster? And I think tentatively, because there's plenty of people that will be an awful lot faster than me with much cheaper equipment. But tentatively I'm going to say yes, it will make me faster than a non-direct drive wheel. So in summary, do I recommend the wheelbase? Yes. Do I think it's essential if you're coming from a CSL Elite to the CSL DD? No, but I do think you'll see improvements simply because you're moving to that direct drive. And if you're not coming from a CSL Elite, you're coming from one of the lower level setups. For me, it's a bit of a no-brainer now. Fanatec have managed to release to the mass market a direct drive wheel that's a sensible price. It's very accessible, has a great ecosystem around it. And if you're thinking about doing it, and you're looking at upgrading, then I think this is the right way to go. As I continue to lap Spa, as I seem to always do, I shall say, thanks very much for watching.